The Magic Wand tool, under the right circumstances, can seem like a truly magical tool for creating selections. In fact, even when it doesn't seem to be performing in a magical way, it may often be the best tool for creating an initial selection. Let's see what this tool has to offer and how it is best put to use. At its heart, the Magic Wand tool is really just a variation on the eyedropper tool. You sample a specific area of the image, and then Photoshop compares the value of that pixel, analyzing all three color channels individually, to neighboring pixels to determine whether those neighboring pixels represent a close enough match to be included in the selection. Because the Magic Wand tool is a variation on the eyedropper tool, we actually need to take a look at a setting for the eyedropper tool before working with the Magic Wand tool. So let's choose the eyedropper tool from the toolbox. The shortcut key is the letter I if you prefer, and then we'll take a look at the sample size setting. The default is point sample. That means when you click on the image using the Magic Wand tool, you'll be sampling only a single pixel below the mouse. Now it's possible that the pixel you clicked on may have been an errant dust spot, a bird flying in the distance, or something else that doesn't exactly match, or at least doesn't match your intentions. I therefore recommend using the 3x3 average or 5x5 average options. These will cause either 9 or 25 pixels, depending on which option you choose, to be averaged together, centered on the pixel you clicked on. And of course, in some cases, for example, when you have a high degree of texture in the area you're trying to select, you might use a higher setting, even going so high as the 101 pixel by 101 pixel average. But in this case, I'll simply use the 3x3 average setting. This setting is sticky, so now that I've set it once, I don't need to come back here again, although it's not a bad idea to come check on it periodically to make sure it's established as desired. I can then choose the Magic Wand tool, which is hiding beneath the Quick Selection tool on the toolbox, so I'll click the button for the Quick Selection tool and hold it to bring up the flyout menu. I'll then choose the Magic Wand tool from the flyout menu. I'm sure you're familiar with the options to create a new selection, add to an existing selection, subtract from an existing selection, or intersect with a selection, so we won't worry about those at the moment. The first setting unique to the Magic Wand tool is tolerance. This determines how much difference between pixel values there can be while still including pixels in a selection. This will be easier to understand if I demonstrate it. I'll reduce the tolerance down to its minimum value of 0, and then I'll click on a pixel within the image. You can barely see that we have just a couple of pixels selected. If I increase this value, let's say up to around 50, and then click on about the same spot, you'll see that I get much more of the image selected. The value actually relates to how many tonal values difference is allowed for each individual color channel when analyzing the pixels. What this really means for you, though, is that if you increase the value, you'll get more pixels selected, and if you decrease the value, you'll get fewer pixels selected. And whether or not those pixels get selected relates to how similar they are to the original pixel you clicked on. If I increase this value all the way to its maximum, and then create a new selection by clicking once again, you'll see that every single pixel except for just a couple of them within the image is included in my selection. I'll go ahead and deselect and bring my tolerance down to a more reasonable level, probably somewhere around 16, which I find to be a very good starting point in most situations. Next, we have the anti-alias option, which is available for most of the selection tools, and it's one I recommend keeping turned on. This will help to smooth out jagged edges in your selection. The contiguous option is an important one. With contiguous turned on, I can only create selections of contiguous areas. For example, if I click in the sky in between the flowers here, only that portion of sky will be selected. I'll deselect and turn off contiguous, and now when I click in that area, I will get a selection that includes many other areas of the image. Again, based on how similar the pixels are, but not based on being contiguous. In most cases, I leave contiguous turned off, because more often than not, when I'm using the Magic Wand tool to create a selection, I'm using it in large part because it does enable me to create a selection that includes a variety of discontiguous areas. Finally, we have the Sample All Layers checkbox. This checkbox allows us to determine whether the selection will be based on what the image actually looks like or only based on the current layer. Now in this case, I only have one layer, but if I had added a series of adjustment layers, for example, having the Sample All Layers checkbox turned on would cause the effect of those adjustments to be taken into account. So I generally leave Sample All Layers turned on. About the only scenario where I would actually turn it off is if I was working on a composite image that contained multiple image layers and I wanted to create a selection of only an area defined by pixels on one of those layers. In most cases, I'll leave it turned on. So now that you have a basic understanding of the mechanics of the Magic Wand tool, let's take a look at how I would actually use it with an image. You might be tempted to click in the image and then decide whether you need a higher or lower tolerance setting and then increase or decrease it accordingly. But that gets to be a little time-consuming and not terribly efficient. Sure, you might eventually create a selection with one click, but it will take you many, many clicks to get there. Instead, if the initial selection looks reasonably good, I'll leave it alone. I won't try to adjust my tolerance setting, but instead will simply hold the Shift key to access the Add to Selection option and then click on additional areas of the image in order to sample those areas and increase the size of my selection. In this case, it only took maybe 5 or 6 clicks to get what appears to be a pretty good selection. Now granted, 5 or 6 clicks still takes a little bit of time, but that takes less time than deselecting, changing the tolerance, clicking again, reevaluating, and repeating that process over and over until you create a good selection. The key to the Magic Wand tool is to keep your expectations realistic, and to keep in mind that you don't need to create a one-click selection in order for the Magic Wand tool to provide a bit of magic when creating selections.